And my name's David Olsen, O-L-S-E-N, for you folks up in northern Minnesota that kept spelling it wrong all through my school days. I was born in Grand Forks, moved to Warren back when I was probably 3 years old. Went to school there, graduated from Warren, 65 years old. From Warren, I moved to Bemidji to attend college there to study photography. But after about a year and a half, they changed the photography program from commercial photography, where you take people's portraits, you do weddings, things like that most people would want to pay for, and they changed it into arts photography, which blurred babies, people's shoes, things that I just didn't think anybody would pay for. So my college advisor, who had long hair and had never been in the military, when I confronted him with the prospect of, I don't want to continue going to school in Bemidji studying this kind of photography, he suggested that I join the Navy because he said he heard they had good schools for photography. And since he'd never been in the military, I figured, why would he lie? So I signed up for the Navy in that winter, but because photography is such a specialized skill, I had to wait 8 months in what was called the delayed entry program before I could actually go to boot camp. So for 8 months, I just hung out, took some more college classes, so that when I did go into the Navy, I could go in as an E3 when I got out of boot camp because I had enough college credits. And I went to boot camp in August down in Orlando, Florida. And from that time, after the boot camp period, where I was the company commander, recruit company commander, they put me in charge of the 79 guys in my company for marching and keeping order in the barracks when the company commanders weren't around. I went to a school in Pensacola, Florida for my photography school. And back in those days, because I got there, in early winter, in those days, that school was what they called self-paced. In other words, they had like workbooks they would give you, and you could go through the lesson plans in there and turn in your homework at your own pace. Although there was a time limit. I mean, they weren't going to let you be a professional student. I finished that school second fastest of anybody that had gone through that school. When I first got to that school, the person who actually set the record told me that there was three ways of doing photography: the right way, the wrong way, and the Navy way. And she looked at me and said, "You college pukes tend to do it wrong." And I proved her wrong. From there, I went, for my first duty assignment was at the Naval Photographic Center in Washington, D.C. And of course, this would have been for the inauguration of President Reagan. I was working in the black and white print room, and they would fly the film in from the events that were going on around D.C. to celebrate the inauguration. They'd helicopter them into the photo center. They would process the film. Film would come down to the black and white print room where I was working, and we would print out the pictures, and they would fly them back to the various ceremonies that were going on for people to get in like VIP picture books. I was stationed there for 18 months. I met my wife there, and after that I took orders. Her and I took orders. Well, she wasn't in the Navy, but I took orders to Jacksonville, Florida, to be in a anti-submarine warfare squadron, flying in a P-3C Orion. I was in the squadron, was VP-45, the Pelicans. I was attached to that squadron for 3 years. In the 3 years that I was there, we deployed twice, once to Sigonella, Sicily, and we were there when Etna was erupting, like it is now, which will give you a timestamp as when this was recorded. And I worked in the photo lab there, and I did do some aerial photography also while we were there. Again, with anti-submarine warfare, so the only time we took pictures was when a submarine had to surface, or there was some unique Russian ships going through the Mediterranean, and they wanted to get photo recon of those. The second deployment was another 6-month deployment, and that was to Rota, Spain. again in the Mediterranean. And yeah, so that was it for the P3 squadrons. That was the 3-year assignment there. And from after that, I went back to what was considered shore duty, and I got stationed at the Naval Explosive Ordnance Disposal Technology Center in Indian Head, Maryland, which was also the location of the EOD school at that time. We worked on special projects, any kind of ordnance that was found, foreign or domestic. We, as a photographer, had to photograph it in its various states of disassembly so that they could write the publications for the technicians out in the field. In case they ever came across this kind of weapon, they would know how to render it safe. So I got to see a lot of unique, lot of things there. We deployed to various bases around the United States, various missile factories, bomb factories. When the Stark got hit with the mines in the Med, they flew one of the mines that was unexploded into Indian Head, Maryland, and they took it apart, and we photographed all the bits and pieces of that. When the Exocet missile hit the Stark, the unexploded warhead from that was also flown out to Indian Head, Maryland, where we exploited that. And the French weren't real happy about that, so we had to put it back together and give it back to them when we were done. While I was there, I was voted the Sailor of the Year for the for the duty station that I was at, which was special because I was one of only 3 photographers there, and everybody else was EOD technicians. So for a photographer to get Sailor of the Year was unique. Unfortunately, I did not win Shore Sailor of the Year for the Navy. If I had, it would have been automatic advancement to E7, which would have been nice. After that duty station...
How long you been in for now?
Pardon me?
When you got this award, how long were you in?
See, well, it was 3 years with the P3s, a year and a half in DC, so that's 4.5. Probably almost 6 years.
And you were E7? Or E6?
Nope. Yeah.
E6, okay.
Yeah. So, so I was there for those 3 years, and then after that, I transferred to a fighter squadron, Tomcats, F-14s, like in Top Gun, old Top Gun, now they're F-18s, but anyway, F-14 squadron. They carried a photo reconnaissance pod. The acronym for it was a TARPS pod, T-A-R-P, which stood for Tactical Aerial Reconnaissance Photographic System, TARPS.
So you're on the aircraft carrier?
Yeah, I was stationed on the USS Forrestal, which was...
What are the living conditions on there?
Well, I don't know if it was a joke or not, but they were gonna mothball. They were talking about mothballing the Forrestal because that was a Vietnam era carrier. It was an old carrier. It was one of the first of the super carriers with the angled deck, and they were talking about decommissioning it. But then they said, well, what we can do is turn it into a penal colony and anchor it out in off the coast of Florida and use it as a prison. But the Bureau of Prisons said it would be cruel and unusual punishment. So, like I said, I don't know if that's true or not, but living conditions on the Forrestal were it was noisy all the time. There was zero privacy. I was a first class, so I had a little better than the E5 and belows. They were living in a 90-man barracks area, and I was in a 36-man barracks area. I was down right near the water line. And because the carrier was so old, there was a sponson, an area on the ship that when they took on jet fuel and they refueled for jet fuel on board the carrier, there was an overflow area that, it would overflow into the sea if they filled it up too much. And the access hatch to the overflow area was in our berthing area. And if we got into really rough seas, the water would splash up into the overflow vent and hit that cover. And because it wasn't watertight, we would actually have water ankle deep in our berthing area sometimes, sloshing around. Yeah, so that was unique. When we pulled into port, it was a nightmare because there would be literally shit in the showers. People go out and get drunk, forget how to use the bathrooms. I mean, it was, yeah, it was unique. It was really unique. Again, back in those days, it was all snail mail. I deployed with the squadron twice.
What was the food like?
Food, well, it was okay. For the most part, I got omelets made to order. The only thing is, if the cold cereal came in them little boxes, they would have the little, single serving cereal boxes. And I used to, and this was no joke, you'd open up the box, you'd dump it in your bowl, you'd put in milk, and there'd be little black specks floating in there. And if the black specks were moving, you knew the cereal was fairly fresh. If the black specks just floated dead, then you knew that was really old cereal. I guess these are some sort of weevils or something, I was told. So I told my mom to go ahead and start sending me, boxes of regular Cheerios cereal because I didn't like sweetened cereal. And one of the first boxes of cereal she sent in a care package was honey nut Cheerios, which I didn't like, and I was able to sell that box at auction for over $20 to one of the guys that worked for me. But for the most part, though, the food wasn't that bad. You got 4 meals a day you could eat. That was the odd thing. When I was on deployment on the ship, I ate, 4 meals a day basically, and I lost weight. I always lost weight on deployment. It was stressful, I guess. Plus, the ship's always moving, so you're never standing still. Even when you're standing still, you're always having to shift your weight to compensate for the ship's movement. And, that and the stress, I guess, were the only reason I could see why a person would lose weight and eat more often. It just didn't make sense to me. I did work on the flight deck. I was actually the shop supervisor for our squadron tarp shop. So I worked daytime.
So what'd you do? What were you doing on the deck?
Well, the tarps pod itself was the biggest, heaviest thing the F-14 carried. And only certain F-14s were configured to be connected to the pod. It was little over 19 feet long and weighed a ton. And we would hang that on Weapon Station 5 on the F-14. And it was operated by the backseater, the reel, that sat behind the pilot when they flew reconnaissance missions. And it was mainly used for target acquisition and then bomb damage assessment after the missions. It had 3 sensor systems in it. It had a forward camera that could look ahead at a 45-degree angle or look straight down. It had a panoramic camera that could go 180 degrees from horizon to horizon. And then it also had an infrared camera sensor in the back. One of the unique things about the panoramic camera is the size of the film was 5-inch film. The film was 5 inches wide. And the negative size for each time that middle camera took a picture was over 30 inches long. And it could do over 7 frames a second.
Wow.
So it was transporting, 7 times 3, it's, 210 inches of film in a second and get 7 shots. So the way that thing had to be threaded, because it had to make 2 45-degree turns, the film did, to go through that thing. If you were off one sprocket hole, it would explode the film in there and the camera wouldn't work. So humidity was also a battle. Film, when it gets wet, sticks. So the pod itself actually had an air conditioning system in it for climate control and to keep the humidity down. But before you could get the air conditioning turned on the pod, of course, the plane would have to be running, your film was still sitting up on the flight deck, which was hot, humid, wind blowing around. So there were a lot of instances where we would have to do an emergency swap out of the film magazines because it would jam up for, clogging up because it got stuck. I saved a guy from getting sucked into an A7 one time. He was going to step in front of a turning engine, and he didn't hear it because you can't hear anything up on the flight deck. I mean, the noise is just, you got hearing protection on, but it's still so loud that in order to talk to somebody, you actually have to put your mouth up to the ear muff and yell into it in order for them to hear you. Otherwise, everything was done with hand signals on the flight deck. But yeah, he didn't hear the engine turning right next to him, and I stopped him from stepping in front of it. Yeah, it was dangerous. At nighttime, you'd have to walk around because the flight deck, it was pitch dark. You'd have to walk around with your arm up in front of you like this, so you wouldn't walk into a missile canard, you know, a fin or the tail of an aircraft or something. Then, of course, there's chains that go across from the landing gear to the pad eyes, which is where they would chain the planes down to. And the chains are black. The flight deck's black. It's nighttime, so a lot of times you'd have to walk really gingerly in order to make sure you didn't trip. Yeah, you couldn't use a regular flashlight on the flight deck because the enemy might be able to spot it. So we had dark blue lenses on our flashlights. Dark blue at night, you might as well not even have had a flashlight, but that's what they gave us. But yeah, I did 2 deployments. One was in support of Provide Comfort, which was right after Operation Desert Storm. We were on standby to deploy to relieve one of the carriers over there, but we never got to. It was so disorganized that they flew all of the ground personnel, because you know we didn't fly in the F-14s. There's only 2 seats, so all the people that supported the F-14s would fly in a C-9, which is basically a DC-9 plane, from Oceana Naval Air Station in Virginia Beach, is where the squadron was based out of, down to Mayport, Florida, which is where the ship was at. So they loaded everybody up on the C-9, flew us down there with all the hardware and equipment to work on aircraft, and then they canceled the deployment and flew us all back again. But told us don't unpack anything, just leave it packed because we could go at any 24 hours notice.
Do you remember what year this was?
91. 91. During Desert Storm. It was right after Desert Storm. We did not participate in the storm itself. We were in Operation Provide Comfort, which was in support of the Kurdish people in northern Iraq, enforcing the no-fly zone. But when we did deploy, it was a seven-month deployment. So, yeah, and we lost some people on that deployment. We pulled into Marseille, and there was somebody that went into the wrong part of town and got killed in a gunfight between 2 drug guys, you know, because there was always a no-go zone in certain towns. They would tell you these certain areas of town are off limits, stay out of them, because there's, you know, nefarious activities going on there. But one of the sailors obviously got drunk and wandered into the wrong part of town and ended up dying. We had one guy that jumped off the ship after going through past Bermuda. He got a Dear John letter from his wife or girlfriend. We hadn't gotten mail for a few days coming across the ocean. When we got close to Bermuda, they were able to get an aircraft in with mail on it. And because we were cleaning the flight deck, because we were coming back home, there was no helos on the flight deck to try to get to this guy before he drowned. And he jumped overboard without a flotation coat on anyway, so I don't know if they'd have found him even if they had a helo on the deck. But, yeah, we didn't lose too many people on that cruise. Just one guy because of an accident, one guy because he got in the wrong part of town, and another guy because he killed himself.
Yeah.
After that duty assignment, I transferred to the National Security Agency at Fort George G. Meade, Maryland.
How many years you got in now?
At that point, 12.
Yeah. What's your rank now?
E6.
E6 still? Okay.
Yeah, they were only rating or advancing 3 to 5 E7s a year in my job specialty. So take a number, wait in line.
Yeah.
You know, there was different different criteria that they used in advancing you in rank, time that you'd been in the military, time that you'd been at the current rank you were at, your performance evaluations, medals and awards, letters of commendation. Plus, they gave you a written test on your knowledge of your job specialty. And all these things came into play as far as whether or not you moved up to the next rank. So competition was pretty fierce. But yeah, so when I transferred to Fort Meade to work at the NSA, technically I was assigned to the Naval Security Group Activity, NSGA, which was at Fort Meade, but then they sent me to the agency, worked at the photo lab there. I was the only military photographer at NSA. All the rest were all civilians. And that, I guess, is how it always was. It took me about 6 months to get my clearances where I could actually go into the agency. Until that point, they kept me out in a trailer doing passports and credentials for agents, for people that worked at NSA. But once I got to go, in the building and stuff like that, then I got to go do photographic assignments with that. The director of the NSA, the head guy, he was a Navy Admiral McConnell, and he had just gotten there shortly after I'd finally got my clearances, and one of the civilian photographers had photographed the previous director and had commented to him when he was trying to get him to smile and said something about having a stone face. Well, that didn't go over too well. And so that director, on his way out, informed Admiral McConnell, there was like a wise guy working at the portrait studio at the agency there, and, you might want to avoid him or something. So when Admiral McConnell was time for to get his original or his official portrait done, he requested the Navy guy, which was me. So I did his portrait, and his wife picked out which one she liked the best, and he autographed that and gave me a copy, thanking me for doing a fine job, that kind of stuff. But I was stationed at NSA for 4 years. I was assigned there for 3 years, but they extended me an extra year because they liked the job I was doing. And while I was there, digital photography was just starting to come into existence, so to speak. So Kodak was working unofficially with the photo lab there at the agency, and we were evaluating some of their digital equipment to see how it might be useful to the government. And I was put in charge of that operation. And then during my time there, the GS-15 that was in charge of the shooting crew, because some people did nothing but print pictures, some people did nothing but develop film, some people did nothing but go out and shoot, take pictures. The GS-15 that was in charge of the shooting crew had retired, and none of the GS-13s wanted the job unless they could get promoted to GS-15. It's like, I ain't going to do the job if I ain't going to get the pay. So the chief of the lab, in order to kind of give them the middle finger, said, well, fine, I'll have the Navy guy take the job, and he'll be assigning you your tasks on a daily basis. So for quite a while there, I didn't have to wear a uniform because I was staying in the lab, and the lab was in a SCIF, a secure information facility. So even any military that was going to come in there would have to call ahead in order for us to give them codes and permission to get into the photo lab. And I had a uniform there at work, so I knew if anybody military was coming, I'd just get into my uniform and be in uniform when they got in there. And when they left, I get into shorts and a t-shirt again and sit around. The chief of the lab looked at me one day. He said, "You are one sorry excuse for a sailor." But yeah, when I and I retired out of there because that was right at the end of Clinton was just drawing down the military. Interesting thing before that. Vice President Gore was going to make a visit out to the NSA to get a tour, and they wanted me to do the photography of his tour around the NSA, because what would happen when we had a VIP show up like that, we would have a photographer shadow them, take pictures of them looking at stuff that was unclassified, and then we would quickly get the film to the lab, process it, print it up in color, and give it to them in a little bound book as a remember that you were here type of thing, a photo book for them, so that they'd have that as a keepsake. So when Gore was going to visit, they wanted me to shadow him around, but he broke his leg skiing, so he couldn't make it. So I ended up not being able to do that, but yeah, that was one of the more interesting things that happened that I can talk about. But yeah, I retired out of there because Clinton was drawing down the military, and if your job specialty was in an overmanned status, in other words, the Navy had more of those than they really needed, you could request early retirement. So since my time there was going to be up, and since my enlisted code was an 8345, which was going to send me back to a carrier, basically, back with the F-14s again. And when I was with the F-14 squadron, I was deployed, gone away from my home, gone away from my family, 30 out of 36 months. So I said, well, I kind of like my wife and kids. If I didn't, I'd stay in. But no, I opted for early retirement, which only cost me a little bit of money on a monthly retirement basis. But
how many years?
As far as privileges go, I had full retirement privileges.
How many years you got?
I had just under 16.
And
I
retired. And you still collected retirement?
Oh yeah.
Oh.
But for every month early, it was called the what was it called? They had an acronym for that too, but it was basically for every month you retired early before 20, you lost 1/12 of a percent of what your retirement would be if you'd have stayed 20.
I didn't know they gave you retirement up before 20.
Yep.
Is that a special thing, or?
Yep, because they were trying to draw down the military. They were trying to get people to voluntarily leave, and they had to give them some sort of carrot on their way out the door. So that was the carrot that I got. Now, the caveat with that was that if you went into a job outside the Navy that was considered community service of some sort, I don't care, driving a school bus, working as a cop, a teacher, whatever. If you went into some sort of public service field, the time you spent at that job would start your retirement counter counting toward the 20-year retirement mark.
Oh.
So at age 62, your retirement check would go up to what it would have been if you'd have stayed for 20 years.
Okay.
Which, since I worked at Northland Community and Tech College after I got out of the Navy, I was able to count that time. So, yeah, now I'm collecting retirement at the rate that I would have if I'd have stayed 20 years.
Cool.
But yeah, I retired out of NSA at end of October of 95.
Okay.
They wanted me to stay. They offered me a job as a civilian to stay there doing what I had been doing. But it would have been at a GS-13, and with a wife and 2 kids in the Washington, D.C. area, that ain't enough to make it. You'd be living in a van or a trailer down by the river somewhere. I mean, its cost of living was so bad there. But my wife was from that area, so she would have liked it if we could have stayed there. But I moved. After that job, I ended up getting a job at the National Drug Intelligence Center for a short time as a consultant in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. But that job was soon to end, so I was lucky enough to end up working at Northland Community Tech College for 20 years after that.
That's how you ended up in Iowa?
Pardon me?
That's how you ended up in Iowa?
Well, no, Northland Community Tech College. That's in Thief River Falls, Minnesota.
Ah, well, I thought you were in Iowa.
Well, I'm in Iowa now, but when I got out of the Navy, I moved back to Warren for another 2 decades. Moved back to Warren. My wife was from Fairfax, Virginia, and I took her and my family to Warren, Minnesota, and we moved into a house, bought it sight unseen. Never seen it, but it was in a quote unquote dry part of town that never flooded, and had a required number of bedrooms and bathrooms. But right after we moved in was the worst winter that I'd ever seen or anybody's ever seen. That was my wife's introduction to life up in that area. And then that spring Grand Forks flooded and caught fire, and that was her welcome to the Northland. I apologized to her for the rest of my 20 years there. Yeah, she did not have a good time in Warren, not at all. So anyway, I lived in Warren for 20 years, and even after 10, 15 years, I would run into people on the street who didn't know I lived in Warren. They're like, "Oh, are you visiting relatives?" "No, I live here." "Well, how long you been here?" "Oh, since 1995, 96. "Really?" It's like, yep. Yeah, so it was unique, but I had a good time in the Navy. The best duty assignment I had was when I was with EOD. Those were the best bunch of folks I ever worked with. I got to see nuclear missile launches. I got to see stuff that you normally don't get to see. And they made me an honorary disposalier, so if I ever go on base anywhere that has a EOD shop, I'm welcome to participate in anything they got going on there. I enjoyed that. That assignment was the best. Was the best. Those were a great bunch of guys. Some of them even had all their fingers.
Yeah.
Literally, some of them had all their fingers. Some of them didn't. The more senior they were in rank, the more likely they were not to have all their fingers. So yeah, and the dive school was there too. So a lot of them were divers. But it was great. It was a great duty assignment. They flew me all around the United States. It was really great. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Sounds like you saw a lot. Did a lot.
Yeah, I got around. Yep, France, all around the Med, and Greece, Turkey, Egypt, Israel, Morocco, Spain. England, I all around the Med. The only place I ever went where they told us don't eat any of the food out on the local economy was Egypt.
Oh yeah,
because don't eat anything. If you want to eat, we'll give you a boxed lunch from the boat. That'll have a sandwich, an apple, and some stuff in it, and eat that. But don't eat out on the economy. And I had a friend that was a photographer. He decided that because he saw Kentucky Fried Chicken in Alexandria, Egypt, he thought it'd be a good idea to eat there because it's Kentucky Fried Chicken. He paid for weeks for that. Yeah, he had the screaming shits for weeks. Yeah, medical didn't know what got into him, but they couldn't fix it. So he was hating life for a couple weeks. Yep.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So,
not a good thing.
Israel was good. I liked Israel a lot. And Sicily was great. I loved Sicily. They loved Americans. I loved Sicily. If I could pick a place to move overseas, it would have been Sicily. Yeah.
Good. Anything else you want to add, David?
No, not really. A classmate of mine, Lyle Palm, he went into the Navy right about the same time I did, and he went welder, and he's doing well. David Sedlacek, I think he went into the Navy too. He was in the same class I was. I mean, there was a few of us that went in, but only a couple of us had stayed long enough to retire. So, but no, that's about it.
Well, as you were in there, did you see people from your hometown or anything like that while you were in the service?
Debbie McDonough. I actually ran into somebody from Warren, Minnesota. I was visiting. Let's see, was I in the fighter squadron or P3 squadron? I was in Naples, Italy. I was in Naples on leave. Might have been with the P3 squadron, but and I was walking through the exchange at Naples, and there was somebody from Warren. She was one class ahead of me, class of '77. Her name was Debbie McDonough, and yes, I that's the only person from Warren I ever saw there. But I saw her, and we talked and visited, and I spent the night at her place, and yeah, it was really weird. The world got really small awful fast when that happened. Yeah, no, that was unique.
Yep. Well, David, I want to thank you for your service and thank you for doing this interview.
Yeah, well, thanks for being able to do it with me and putting it out there.
Yep. Thank you.